Hi there, welcome to this video on globalisation and religion. The purpose of this video is just to introduce some additional arguments that relate to globalisation and religion, and also wanted to bring in a little bit of application to the current COVID-19 situation, which does reflect some of these views that I'm going to discuss today. So the first argument I wanted to bring forward was the work of Helland from 2000. Now Helland talked about the idea of online religion and religion online, and the argument being that religion has created and changed its formatting as a result of the development of social media and the internet, and it's sort of developed into two kind of identifiable branches. So as I said, the identifiable branch of religion online and online religions. Now a religion online is a way in which religion has a presence in online forums, so it could be social media like Twitter or Instagram or any other kind of social networking site, and really they use the system and the site as a way of addressing messages, sending feedback to their congregations, to highlight key events, key changes, and maybe even potentially to convert new members. And it's very much one directional information, so there's no feedback or generally any dialogue between this use of online religion, but it's an electronic version of the church, and it's a way of spreading the message and spreading approved message. So the Pope, for example, as we've seen here on the image, has 8 different Twitter accounts in 8 different languages, potentially 9 different languages, but as you can see, generally of the almost 2,000, 3,000 tweets that go out to 17.9 million followers, it's messages and prayers and kind of information to the members of the church. On the other hand, an online religion is a religion which exists online, as the name suggests. There's no physical base for the religion, so this could be seen more with some of the newer age movements we've seen and discussed in the past, and the idea that these religions exist solely online as an online space. And it might be discussion boards, it could be forums, it could be websites, and really the community exists online. And this could be, again, more linked to self-religions where people practice at home and worship or conduct ceremonies in their own home and don't meet with other people. So this could be stuff like Reiki, some of those new age movements. You can even see it with stuff like the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster as an online religion. With these forms of religion, unlike religion online, there is more communication, there's more dialogue, there's more movement of information back and forth between members, as opposed to the one direction information. Now this argument is quite interesting because it supports secularization, because postmodernists would see the movement of religion to online religions as alternative forms of religion that are replacing kind of what we say traditional established religion. However, this can also be used as an argument against secularization because it shows that religion is moving online. This could also supplement and support arguments like Davies and religious pluralism in the idea that religion is changing rather than declining. And actually the fact that more people maybe practice at home could be increasing the diversity, the range of religion in our societies. Now, bring this into the kind of contemporary with the COVID-19 situation. One of the big things is that, like many industries and sectors, most of them have been forced to move online, and this is what the church and all forms of variations of churches are no different here. So some of the images I've got here are just 2 examples of the way in which the kind of traditional established church has had to move online. So we have video sermons or live streaming sermons to a congregation who are obviously watching at home, and we also have on the left sort of people can send their pictures and have their picture placed on a pew in a church, and then services are conducted effectively to the pictures in lieu of the people. So again, these are different ways in which religion has changed its formatting and moved online as a result of a response to Corona. Now, interestingly, this article here is one that I'm going to sort of flag up. It's a discussion about whether COVID-19 will cause a religious recession or it might cause a religious revival, and it kind of looks at both sides. So it's an interesting article to read if you're looking for some additional reading. As I say, it's a blog article, so it's not an official academic article as such, but I think it raises some interesting questions about how the current situation has forced religion to change its processes, and in doing so, what you might see is that the movement online could be more engaging for younger people, as opposed to having to go to a church on a set day of the week. But at the same time, it could be putting off the older sort of communities who are more established and kind of more likely to be using or having membership of the church. And again, it's kind of an interesting discussion that's raised. Now, the second argument I wanted to highlight relating to religion and globalisation is this one here, and it's the existential security theory. And this is the work of Norris and Inglehart. Now, I think this is a really interesting theory, particularly for trying to explain differences in religion between different cultures and different countries. We know, and evidence shows us that Western Europe is predominantly and quite secular compared to other parts of the world. It's a kind of a Western European phenomenon that we are as secular as we are. And this theory does try and put some grounding to why that could be the case. And what it looks at is that it almost looks at the marketplace of religion. It looks at why and how religion exists around the world. And what they argue is that there are differences in religious beliefs between societies, but it may be due to the level of choice. So this religious marketplace argument suggests that in a society where people feel safe, secure, they take religion for granted, and maybe religion doesn't succeed or doesn't thrive as well as in an environment where people need comfort, need protection, feel insecure, and therefore, because there's a greater demand for religion, there's often a greater variety of religion, which is finding membership. So it's an interesting argument, and I will just explain what I mean and apply it to, as I say, the COVID-19 situation. So Norris and Inglehart argue that in poorer societies where people face life-threatening risks like famine, disease, environmental disasters, poverty, there will be a higher level of religiosity, and religion providers will provide comfort to people in these times of crisis. If we look at the next two diagrams, so this diagram shows you the percentage of respondents who see religion as important in their daily life. So you can see the darker the blue, religion is more important. And I wanted you to compare it to this next diagram. Now this diagram comes from Visual Capitalists, and it is shown as the most and least happy countries in the world. And again, it's very anecdotal. It's not really sort of any scientific basis to this. But if you look at the kind of where there's greater unhappiness in people's lives, we do seem to see similar patterns of greater religious engagement. So this does kind of anecdotally, and it's not academic at all anyway, but it does provide some basis on support for what Norris and Inglehart are arguing, that when there's greater people are in more desperate, more difficult situations, we might see more use of religion. By comparison, what they also argue is that in rich societies, where people have higher standards of living, there's lower risk, and there's a greater sense of security, we see lower levels of religion. So if we look at the map, the areas where there's very low blue or light blue, other than the greys where there's no data, but you sort of think about Western Europe again, is quite low in terms of that shade of blue. America slightly darker than Western Europe, and I will explain why. So again, thinking back about happiness, you can see the sort of Western Europe area at the top here. Lots of 7.7, 7.6s, 7.3s. There is a higher level of sort of happiness in these areas. Whereas sort of in America, it's slightly lower in the sort of 6.9s, which could be down to security crisis. So if we think about state welfare as an example, state welfare has a big role in society. The more a country spends on welfare and benefits, the lower their religiosity tends to be. For example, European countries spend a lot of money on welfare, provide free healthcare, universal sort of support to citizens, and that lowers the risk. America does seem to have higher levels of religiosity compared to Europe, and it could be due to the lack of or lower levels of welfare support and healthcare that is available to individuals. Just as this diagram shows here, you can see, as I mentioned before, about those lower levels. Most of the European countries, so we're seeing Denmark, Finland, Czech Republic, Iceland, France, Norway, Netherlands, almost this lower end of the graph are predominantly European countries. Obviously, I know you see New Zealand's in there and a few other countries in there, but quite low poverty rates, and that could be attributed to welfare support. Whereas if you look at other countries at the other end, so sort of South Africa's, Costa Rica, Brazil, United States, some of these countries which were higher on that scale of being religious, could be linked to these this level of poverty and lack of security. So this graph came from the OECD. So this could explain why America has a higher level of religion compared to Europe, even though it is a wealthier nation, and there could be more stability and more security there, but the lack of welfare support could be a factor in this argument. Now, as some other sort of articles relating it back to COVID-19 and the current corona situation, one of the things that I've sort of seen in America is that in this current economic crisis, in this social crisis, in this pandemic, where there's a lack of security, people feel unsafe, the amount of people who are using religion as almost like a shield, or see religion as protecting them against infection, has become more evident. So the Charlotte Observer conducted a survey, and more than half of the respondents who were polled said that they believed God would protect them from infection. And obviously broken down by the affiliation, it talks about white Christians and different denominations of religion, but most of them believe in God, and obviously a lot of them, over half of them polled, believe God or religion would protect them. This sort of data came from the Financial Times, and again it highlights similar patterns that during the pandemic we've seen in America religious faith growing. So in all US adults, and particularly sort of Christians, all the denominations, their belief in faith has grown stronger. But this also does sort of sometimes appeal maybe with the agnostics, who have become slightly more weaker. But most groups have become more stronger in their faith, more committed to their faith. And as coming back to that protection argument, one of the other sort of ways I saw religion providing protection, and also as an example of the online religion discussion we had earlier, is the Pope doing a corona protection prayer, or leading a prayer to Virgin Mary to protect people from the coronavirus. And again, I found this quite an interesting as an example to use here. Now, Norris and Engelhardt, as a theory, does have its criticisms. So Norris and Engelhardt only focus on Europe and America. They ignore other countries and other religious beliefs. Italy is also one area of criticism. So after doing my rasearch, I found it's ranked fourth in welfare spending lists. So it spends the fourth highest amount on welfare, but is a very religious society. So it contradicts their argument. So as a society with very good welfare support, provisions, protections, on their theory basis, it shouldn't be religious. So it contradicts some of their arguments. And last but not least, they only focus on religious belief as a response to deprivation, and they ignore other reasons why some individuals choose to be religious. So religious participation that appeals to the wealthy doesn't really come into consideration, such as Scientology, which does require a significant level of wealth in order to engage in the highest levels of the religion. And there we have it. So just a few arguments looking at, also additional arguments of globalisation and religion, with a brief application to COVID-19. So thanks for watching.